The text from my sister landed like a bomb on a peaceful Sunday morning. I was curled up on my window seat, watching snowflakes drift past my Brooklyn apartment window when my phone buzzed. Hey, Emma. Slight change of plans. We had to give your ticket to Aunt Patricia since she's going through that rough divorce. But you'll still watch the kids while we're in Aspen, right? They're so excited to spend time with their favorite aunt. I stared at the message until the words blurred. The family ski trip had been planned for months, my first real vacation in 2 years. I'd even bought new snow gear, which now sat mockingly in the corner of my bedroom. My fingers hovered over the phone. Growing up as the youngest of 4 meant I was used to being the family pushover. Need someone to work a holiday shift? Call Emma. Emergency babysitter? Emma's available. Last-minute wedding planning? Emma will handle it. But something inside me had shifted lately. Maybe it was turning 30 last month, or maybe it was watching my siblings build their lives while treating mine as an afterthought. Let me think about it. I texted back, already opening my laptop. My sister Rachel's response was immediate. What's there to think about? Mom and Dad already booked their flights and Jake and Sarah are bringing the twins. We're all counting on you. All counting on me to do what exactly? Stay behind in freezing New York to watch their kids while they hit the slopes? I pulled up my banking app and checked my savings. The money I'd set aside for the Aspen trip was still there, untouched. A pop-up ad caught my eye. Last-minute Caribbean getaway deals. The image showed pristine beaches and swaying palms. My mouse clicked before I could second-guess myself. 3 hours later, I had a confirmation email for a week-long stay at a boutique hotel in St. Lucia. Solo traveler, adults only, no babysitting required. I sent Rachel another text. Sorry, but I've made other plans. You'll need to find different childcare arrangements. The response was explosive. My phone started ringing immediately, but I let it go to voicemail. The next week was a blur of passive-aggressive family messages. Mom called to understand my perspective, while simultaneously guilt-tripping me about family obligations. Dad sent his traditionally brief text. Disappointed. My brothers and sisters traded off between radio silence and lengthy paragraphs about selfishness. I spent my evenings packing sundresses and swimsuits instead of winter gear. Each bright piece that went into my suitcase felt like a small act of rebellion. You're really doing this? My best friend Olivia asked over coffee. Going full scorched earth on the family Christmas? I stirred my latte, watching the foam swirl. They canceled my ticket without even asking me, then expected me to be grateful for the privilege of providing free childcare. While they're living it up in Aspen, Olivia finished. She raised her cup in a toast. Good for you! It's about time someone taught them you're not the family doormat. The morning they were supposed to drop off the kids, I was already in a taxi heading to JFK. My phone buzzed with increasingly frantic messages. We're running a little late, but should be there in 20. Emma, are you home? Your neighbor said she hasn't seen you today. Emma, pick up your phone right now. I switched my phone to airplane mode just as my flight started boarding. First time flying first class, another splurge for my Aspen fund. As I settled into my seat with a complimentary mimosa, I allowed myself to imagine the scene playing out at my apartment. 3 sets of parents, 5 kids, and 2 very surprised grandparents, all standing in my hallway with their overnight bags. Probably calling the building manager by now. Maybe even trying to convince him to let them in for emergency family reasons. The plane lifted off, and I felt a weight lift with it. 6 hours to St. Lucia. 6 hours before I had to deal with the nuclear fallout of my decision. First time to the Caribbean? The woman next to me asked. She was in her 60s, elegant in a way that spoke of comfort with independence. First time traveling anywhere by myself, I admitted. My family usually plans all our trips. She smiled knowingly. Ah, breaking free? Something like that. I found myself telling her the whole story. About growing up as the reliable one, the responsible one, the always available one. About watching my siblings build careers and families while expecting me to orbit around their needs. Good for you, she said when I finished. I didn't take my first solo trip until I was 50. Spent too many years being who everyone else needed me to be. Landing in St. Lucia felt like stepping into another world. The air was thick with warmth and the scent of tropical flowers. Palm trees swayed against a perfect blue sky, and the airport itself was open to the breeze. I switched my phone back on briefly during the drive to my hotel. 47 missed calls, 93 text messages, 3 voicemails from my mother that I didn't dare listen to yet. Instead, I sent one group text. I'm safe and well, enjoying my vacation. Hope you all have fun in Aspen. Then turned my phone off completely. The hotel was everything the website had promised. My room opened directly onto a secluded beach, with a private plunge pool on the terrace. No children splashing or screaming, no family demands. Just the sound of waves and distant steel drums. I spent that first day doing absolutely nothing. Lounged by the pool, ordered room service, walked along the beach at sunset. No schedule, no obligations, no compromise. The guilt tried to creep in around dinner time. I imagined my nieces and nephews disappointed, my siblings scrambling for last-minute childcare. But then I remembered all the times I'd rearranged my life to accommodate their plans. All the dates I'd canceled, the weekend trips postponed, the work deadlines juggled, just because they assumed I'd be available. At the hotel's beachfront restaurant, I met a group of women around my age, all solo travelers. We shared a bottle of wine and our stories. There was Lisa, escaping a demanding job in Seattle. Maria, celebrating her divorce. Jenny, taking a break from her PhD program. Family's important, Lisa said. But so are boundaries. Sometimes you have to disappoint people to stop disappointing yourself. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Rachel. The subject line read, "I get it now." Last night, she wrote, I was complaining to Tom about how selfish you were being. He asked me when was the last time we included you in family planning instead of just expecting you to fill in the gaps. I couldn't remember. Then he asked how I'd feel if someone canceled my ticket and still expected me to babysit. I got angry at him for asking, which probably means he had a point. I'm still mad you didn't tell us directly. The kids were really upset, but I'm starting to understand why you did it this way. We probably wouldn't have listened otherwise. We never really do we? I read the email 3 times, sitting on my terrace as the sun rose over the ocean. The rest of the week passed in a blur of small adventures. I tried scuba diving for the first time, hiked to a waterfall, took a cooking class where I learned to make authentic Caribbean cuisine. In the evenings, I joined my new friends for dinner, or sometimes just sat alone on my terrace, watching the stars reflect on the water. More emails trickled in from my family. Some apologetic, some still angry, all of them processing the shift in our dynamic. Dad's message was characteristically brief. Your mother tells me I've taken you for granted. She's probably right. Enjoy your trip. My brother Jake sent a photo of his twins building a snowman in Aspen with the caption, They miss their Aunt Emma, but we found a great local babysitter. Probably should have done that in the first place. Small steps, small acknowledgments, but they felt monumental. On my last evening in St. Lucia, I finally listened to my mother's voicemails. The first was angry, the second worried, but the third made me sit down on the beach as the sun set. Emma, sweetheart, I've been thinking about the day Rachel was born. You were only 2, but you kept trying to help. Bringing diapers, fetching wipes. Even then, you were our reliable one. Maybe we took advantage of that. Turned your kindness into an expectation. I'm sorry we canceled your ticket without asking. I'm sorry we assumed you'd just adapt to our needs, like you always have. Call me when you're ready. I dug my toes into the cooling sand, watching the sky turn from orange to purple. A week ago, I'd been afraid this trip would fracture my family. Instead, it had cracked open something else, the possibility of change. Back in New York, winter still gripped the city, but something had shifted. My apartment felt different, not just a place I retreated to between family obligations, but my own space, my own sanctuary. Rachel was the first to visit, bringing coffee and cronuts as a peace offering. She sat at my kitchen counter, turning her cup in her hands. The kids made you something, she said, pulling out a slightly crumpled piece of paper. It was a drawing of me on a beach, surrounded by palm trees and what appeared to be friendly sharks. They said next time they want to go where Aunt Emma goes. Next time, I said, I'd love that. As long as it's planned together, not assumed. She nodded, understanding the new boundary being drawn. We booked a summer house in Cape Cod, all of us. If you're interested, we'd love you to come, as family, not childcare. The transition wasn't perfect. Old habits die hard, and there were still moments when my family slipped into familiar patterns. But now I had something I hadn't before, the courage to say no, backed by the memory of that week when I'd chosen myself. My photo from St. Lucia sat framed on my desk, me on a catamaran, hair wild in the wind, smile wider than any family photo had captured. It was a reminder that sometimes the best way to preserve relationships is to risk them changing. I kept in touch with the women I'd met there. We had a group chat where we shared our small victories and daily challenges. Lisa quit her demanding job and started her own business. Maria began dating again. Jenny finished her PhD. And I started building a life that wasn't defined by being available to others. Spring arrived, bringing cherry blossoms to Brooklyn and a different kind of family dynamic. Mom started calling just to chat, not to request favors. My siblings began planning things with me, rather than around me. Even the kids seemed to view me differently, less as the automatic babysitter, and more as the aunt with interesting stories to tell. I found myself saying yes more often, but only because I wanted to, not because I felt obligated. The difference was subtle, but profound. When I watched my nieces and nephews now, it was a choice, not an expectation. One evening, as I was helping my nephew with his science project, he looked up from his solar system model and asked, "Aunt Emma, why didn't you ever do what you wanted before?" "I did," I said, carefully painting Neptune blue. "I just didn't realize I could want more." The Cape Cod trip was approaching, and this time I was part of the planning group chat. My suggestions were considered, my preferences noted. When I offered to take the kids for one afternoon so the parents could have a date night, my sister Sarah actually asked, "Are you sure? We can hire a sitter." The same aunt who'd taken my Aspen spot sent me a long email about her own journey through divorce and finding herself. "Sometimes," she wrote, "it takes someone else's courage to find your own. Watching you stand up for yourself helped me realize I could too." I kept my St. Lucia friends updated on these small victories. Family dynamics don't change overnight, Maria reminded me, but they do change when someone is brave enough to go first. One year after my Caribbean escape, I found myself back at my window seat watching snow fall over Brooklyn. My phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. "Family meeting tomorrow about next year's holiday plans. Your input is required, oh wise one, who taught us all about boundaries." I smiled, remembering that frantic morning when they'd all stood outside my door, learning the hard way that I wasn't always going to be there just because they expected it. My new snow gear sat in the corner, ready for a proper family ski trip, one where I'd actually get to ski. But there was also a beach bag packed for an upcoming solo trip to Bali, because I'd learned that being part of a family doesn't mean losing yourself in it. The family meeting happened at Mom and Dad's place, around the same dining table where we'd had countless holiday meals. But this time was different. Instead of assignments being handed out, there was actual discussion. "What if we did something completely different this year?" I suggested. "Maybe somewhere none of us have been?" The idea sparked a lively debate. Sarah wanted mountains, Jake argued for beaches, Rachel suggested a European Christmas market tour. Mom and Dad sat back, watching their adult children navigate this new territory of mutual respect. "Whatever we decide," Dad said, surprising us all, "we should make sure everyone's actually on board, no more assumptions." He caught my eye and gave a slight nod, acknowledgement of lessons learned. I pulled out my laptop and started a shared document. "Let's make this official. Everyone's preferences, everyone's constraints, everything out in the open." Later that night, walking home through the quiet streets, I called Lisa. "My family's planning next year's holiday," I told her, "and they're actually asking what I want." "Look at you, creating ripple effects," she laughed. "Remember when you thought running away to St. Lucia would ruin everything?" I did remember. The fear, the guilt, the certainty that I was destroying decades of family dynamics. Now I understood that some things need to break before they can be rebuilt stronger. My phone pinged with updates to the shared vacation document. Rachel had added a spreadsheet of budget considerations. Jake was researching kid-friendly activities. Sarah had started a poll for preferred dates. For the first time, I felt like a full participant in my family's life, not just a supporting character in everyone else's story. We eventually settled on a holiday villa in Costa Rica, neutral territory that offered something for everyone. The planning process had its hiccups, but each disagreement was handled with a new awareness. No one wanted to be the one to slip back into old patterns. "I can take the kids for 2 afternoons," I offered during one planning session, "but I'd like to do the ziplining tour on Thursday." "Already booked you a spot," Sarah said, "and we've got a local sitter on standby for the whole week. You're not the default anymore, sis." It was a small comment, but it meant everything. My family had finally understood that loving someone means respecting their right to their own life. Even my youngest niece caught on. When her mother suggested I might want to skip an excursion to watch her, she piped up, "But Mom, Aunt Emma's not just for babysitting." The changes rippled beyond vacation planning. When I decided to go back to school for my master's degree, my family rallied around me instead of complaining about my reduced availability. Mom organized a study schedule for the kids so they wouldn't interrupt my evening classes. Dad helped me convert my spare room into a proper office. You know what's funny? Rachel said one day as we grabbed coffee between my classes. Ever since you stopped being available for everything, you're actually more present when you are around. Like you're really there, not just going through the motions. She was right. By setting boundaries, I'd gain the energy to be fully engaged in the moments I chose to share. The kids got a better aunt, my siblings got a better sister, and I got a better life. My St. Lucia friends and I planned a reunion for our independence anniversary. We met at a vineyard in Napa, sharing stories of how our lives had evolved since that week in the Caribbean. I used to think being selfish was the worst thing a woman could be, Maria said, swirling her wine. Now I realize that sometimes what looks like selfishness to others is really just self-respect. Lisa had brought a journal from our first trip. We laughed reading our entries, all that uncertainty and guilt mixed with newfound freedom. We'd been so worried about ruining our lives by standing up for ourselves. Instead, we'd found our way to better ones. To boundaries, Jenny toasted, and to the courage to enforce them. To knowing our worth, I added, and to families who can learn to see it too. A full year and a half after my Caribbean escape, I found myself back in the family holiday planning mode, but this time as an equal participant. My new diploma hung on my wall, and my calendar was filled with a healthy mix of family time, work commitments, and personal adventures. Remember when we thought we'd lost you? Mom mused during Sunday dinner. When you went to St. Lucia, I was convinced you were breaking away from the family. Instead, Dad added, you showed us how to be a better one. The kids had started calling me Adventure Aunt Emma after I took them rock climbing last month, an activity I'd never have had the energy for in my previous life as the family's permanent backup plan. My brother Jake's wife confided that they'd started teaching their twins about boundaries, using my story as an example. Sometimes the best thing you can do for people is show them they can't take you for granted. The weekly family group chat had evolved too. Instead of being a constant stream of favors and obligations, it became a place to share genuine updates and support. When I posted about a challenging project at work, my siblings offered encouragement instead of immediately asking if this meant I couldn't babysit. I kept my beachfront photo from St. Lucia prominently displayed, but now it had company. Pictures of family trips where I was in the activities, not just behind the camera watching everyone else's kids. Photos of graduation, where my whole family had rearranged their schedules to attend, just as I had done for them countless times before. The latest addition was a snapshot from last week. All of us at a cooking class I'd organized, covered in flour and laughing, equal participants in the chaos and joy of family life. My apartment became a different kind of sanctuary. Instead of a refuge from family demands, it was now a place where my nieces and nephews asked to visit because they wanted to spend time with me, not because their parents needed a sitter. Tell us about the time you ran away to the beach became their favorite bedtime story during sleepovers. I always emphasized the moral, that sometimes love means saying no, and that real family gets stronger, not weaker, when everyone's boundaries are respected. The story evolved as they grew older. For the younger ones, it was an adventure tale about brave Aunt Emma and her tropical escape. For the older kids, it became a lesson about self-respect and standing up for yourself. But weren't you scared? They always asked. Terrified, I'd answer honestly. But sometimes the scariest choices lead to the best changes. As another winter approached, I found myself planning 2 trips, the family reunion in Costa Rica and a solo adventure to New Zealand. The beautiful part was that no one questioned or guilted me about splitting my time. They understood now that my independence made me a better part of the family, not a lesser one. During our last family dinner before the holidays, Rachel raised her glass. To Emma, she said, who taught us that real love doesn't keep score or take advantage, and to all of us for learning the lesson, even if we had to learn it the hard way, Jake added with a grin. Mom squeezed my hand under the table. The gesture reminded me of all the times she'd done that when I was young, usually to calm me down or stop me from speaking up. But this time it was different. A touch of pride, of understanding, of respect. Sometimes I think about that snowy Sunday morning when I got the text about my canceled ticket. How close I came to giving in, to falling back into old patterns. One small moment of courage had changed everything, not just for me, but for my whole family. My phone buzzed with a new message. It was from my new neighbor asking if I could water her plants while she was away. Before, I would have automatically said yes. Now, I checked my calendar first, considered my own plans and needs. Sorry, I'll be traveling those dates, I replied. but I can recommend a great plant sitting service. Setting boundaries, I'd learned, wasn't a single dramatic act. It was a daily practice of small choices, each one an affirmation of self-respect. And somehow, paradoxically, those boundaries had brought me closer to the people I loved than endless availability ever had.